Hello everyone, this is General Hand Grenade. Welcome to my war room in Prince George, British Columbia. So this is the last of the videos that I have to make as far as describing the unit types. I first made one for all of the ships called Naval Warfare 101, and then I made one with the planes called Aerial Warfare 101. And now we're going to do the ground units, and the ground units is probably going to be the shortest video because there isn't a whole lot of things that I haven't described, like that you could do with land units. I mean, there's amphibious assaults, but I've already shown those. I'm going to show an example of an amphibious assault here, but I'm not going to go into it too in depth because I took care of that when it came to doing the video on ships. So we're gonna just get right into it. Before I get started though, I just there was one thing I forgot to mention on my last video, which was the one called Aerial Warfare 101. And that was when I was doing strategic bombing raids, I showed Major Factory, which when bombed could take 20 points of damage. So there's the Major Factory there. I should have mentioned the Minor Factory. There's a Minor Factory there. That can take 6 points of damage. So normally you can put 3 units on it. And so if you had max damage on it 6, you would have to spend at least 4 IPCs in the repair units phase or repair phase at the beginning of your turn to take off 4 points of damage, and then you can put one thing on there because the damage would be at 2 and the capacity is 3, so that leaves you 1. So you could put one thing on, or you could just spend all 6 IPCs and take the damage off of that minor factory, and then you could place 3 units on there. So anyway, sorry about forgetting that. Sometimes, like when you've played the game a lot or you know the rules, you just kind of assume that people know. But I'm trying to make this series for people who maybe have played the game before but don't really know all of the rules. And the rule book is difficult to get through because it jumps around from place to place to place. And I just find that I learn a lot better if somebody shows me how to do something. And so that's why I'm undertaking this. I learned how to play the game much better by watching Grasshopper's videos. And that helped me a lot. It's because I did read the rule book, but I don't know. I just learned a whole lot more when I was watching him do it. So anyway, let's get started. Okay, here we go. On the far left here, these are the unit types that are land units. So we have an infantry. That's the base unit. That's the smallest cost that you'll find in the game. And that's the human element in this game. So, even though it's the smallest cost, it's actually the most important part of the game because an infantry, if it wasn't for the humans in the game, then there would be no need to wage war, would there? Like, ships don't actually fight each other. It's the people on the ships that do it. So anyway, there's the infantry. He attacks at 1 and he defends at 2, and the cost is 3. And then next to that, you have the artillery, and that costs 4 IPCs. And he attacks at 2 and he defends at 2. But the other thing he can do is combined arms. So when you pair 1 infantry and 1 artillery, like if you had this guy and this piece here, then on your attack, then your infantry would be +1. So he would attack at 2 instead of 1. But just 1 to 1 though. Like you couldn't have 2 infantry and 1 artillery and say that both infantry would attack at 2. It's only 1. So if you had 2 artillery and 2 infantry, then you could have 2 infantry at 2 and 2 artillery at 2 on an attack. And then on defense, the artillery does not help him out. It boosts his defense value. The defense value for an infantry is 2. It doesn't bump to 3. And then next here we have mechanized infantry. And what they are is dudes with cool trucks. That's really all it is. And so it's really just an infantry that can move 2 spaces. Both of these first 2 units can only move 1 space. The mechanized infantry can move 2 spaces. And he's like an infantry. He attacks at 1 and he defends at 2. And the same thing with the artillery. When you pair them 1 to 1, then the mechanized infantry will attack at 2 instead of 1. But it doesn't help his defense. His defense stays at 2. And then we have the anti-aircraft. artillery. There's two different kinds of anti-aircraft in the game. There's the anti-aircraft that we saw in the other video that is part of the facilities, and you don't actually see the gun. It's just assumed that an air base or a naval base or a factory will have an anti-aircraft gun with it. And but that is different from the anti-aircraft artillery. They work similarly. It's just that the anti-aircraft artillery works in general combat, not in strategic bombing raids, whereas the other one only works as strategic or tactical bombing raids against the factory or the base. And then the last thing we have here is a tank. And a tank, he moves 2, he costs 6, he moves 2, he attacks and defends at 3, so it's quite a powerful unit. And he does also have combined arms as well, so he can combine with a mechanized infantry to blitz. And we'll get into blitzing in a minute when I show you how to do things. And the other thing, he can upscale also a tactical bomber. A tactical bomber normally attacks at 3. When it's paired with a tank, it can attack at 4. But again, just like the infantry and the artillery, it's 1-to-1. So one tank is not going to help two bombers. It's only going to help one bomber. If you had 2 tanks, then you could help 2 bombers, right? So anyway, that's all the ground units, and we're going to get into. I've set up a bunch of scenarios that are all leading into one attack over here, and I've tried to set it up so that we could see everything that ground attacks have, or that the ground warfare has. So let's just move the camera over here and take a look. Let's move these things out of the way. Okay, so here we have Africa. Now, what I've set up here in sub-Saharan Africa, we're going to attack this here. This is Italians. There is 4 infantry, 3 artillery, and 1 anti-aircraft artillery in French Equatorial Africa. And the Italians also have this space and this space and this space. So they're bordered on 3 sides with their own spaces, but there's nobody in those spaces. And I'll show you why I'm doing that. Now, when you're moving your infantry, there's 2 different movement phases. When you're moving anything, there's 2 different movement phases, and there's combat and there's non-combat. What we're doing here is combat moves. In other words, we're going to attack somebody, but you have to do all of your combat moves at once. So this is one combat move that we're doing, but you can see there's British on the other spots on the board. And if you were going to attack with those other ones, then you would also move them at the time that we're moving these now. But for the purpose of this video, we are only going to move the British that are in Africa here. We are going to use them, and we're going to assault this guy here in many different ways. Okay, so the first thing is an easy one. So the infantry and the artillery move 1 space, and they are adjacent. So 1 space, you can move right into there. So we've got, let's move these things back. We've got 7 infantry and 3 artillery moving in there. Now we could just attack it with that if we want, but we want to go further than that. So we look over here, and we have a tank, and we have 2 mechanized infantry. But they have to blitz through there. Like if the first territory you encounter is an enemy territory and it's unoccupied, then a tank can blitz through there. So he can go through there 1, 2, and he can take that territory. Now, if there was any kind of unit whatsoever in these territories, then the tank would not be able to blitz through there. He'd have to stop, and he'd have to conduct combat against those guys. But that's not the case here. These territories are both empty. So he could go to either one. He could go through this one, or he could go through this one. Let's go through this one here, and we'll take this off. Now, remember I said the combined arms that paired 1-to-1, a tank and a mechanized infantry could blitz. Normally, a mechanized infantry like this could not blitz on its own and take that out and then go to the space afterwards. Normally, a mechanized infantry, like an infantry or an artillery, would have to stop in the first place it encountered. So but because there was a tank and you paired 1-to-1, this guy could go with the tank. So these actually, here, let me show you that again. These guys actually went through there together. But a tank can only do that with one mechanized infantry. So this guy can't go through there now, because this would still be an attack move. This was an attack on the first turn, and he could move through there afterwards if the British were able to take this out. Because that would be a non-combat move, and the British own this territory. But he couldn't do it now because they were, during their combat move, they were taking that out. What this guy could do, and what I probably would do instead, because he can only go the one space, I would probably take him up here and take this out, and there you go. They just gained themselves 1 IPC, because this territory here is worth 1 IPC. So he could go here, and the other two guys could blitz through Nigeria, because they have the ability to blitz. The tank has the ability, and the mechanized infantry has the ability with a tank. So then what else are we going to bring in there? Well, you look at that. We've got some planes up there, don't we? So let's bring those planes down from Egypt. So that's 1 space, 2 space. Now, remember from our aerial warfare video, you have to be able to land these things. So the movement ability of these 3 planes is 4, and there's no air base up here. There's a naval base, but not an air base. So they've gone 2. That means that they can only go 2 more spaces on non-combat movement. So we're doing combat movement, then we're going to conduct combat, and then there's non-combat movement after that. And we can't... we can only move 2 spaces after the combat is over to land those planes. Now, if we were only going, we'd already gone 3 spaces, and we could only go 1 more, then we would have to land it here in Anglo-Egypt, Sudan, because to begin this turn, the Italy owns this space. The space that we're attacking, and remember, they own these 2 spaces as well when our turn began. So we can't land them anywhere there. We could not land them here because that is an impassable zone. Remember, we talked about impassable zones as well. You can't fly over them or walk through them. They're literally impassable. So the only place that these planes could have landed, if they had gone 3 spaces, like if they had started up here in Alexandria and gone 1, 2, 3, then they would have to land there. So I would probably think twice about doing that, because you look back here and there's these Italian guys, and that's probably not a good place to stop, right? Because their turn's going to come shortly after ours. So, but because we started in Egypt and we've gone 1, 2, we can go 3, 4, or we can go 3, 4. We could land down here. Like, we would be safe to do that, and so that's why I'm bringing them in there. So we've come in straight in there. We've come from over here. We've come with our planes. Okay, so now we've got another tank down here, and we've got a space here, and you're thinking we could blitz through there with that tank, right? But we can't. And here's why. Because there's a facility here. There's not normally a facility here, but I've set this up. So there's an air base here, and it doesn't matter if it's an air base or a naval base or a factory. Any one of these things would stop a tank from blitzing through there. When you encounter a base, it's like encountering an infantry. You must stop and conduct combat. Now, you don't actually conduct combat against these as a ground unit, but it's implied that you would have to stop and you would have to take over that base. So let's take these things back out of there. Okay, so there's an air base there. Now we can attack that with a tank, and we will. Let's attack that. So there's nobody to defend, so we're just going to take the flag off. Now we've taken this space here, but like I said, we could not blitz through there because we've encountered an air base, so we have to stop. Now what else can we do? Well, we've got lots in there already. We could stop there, but I don't feel like stopping. How about you? Okay, we've got a bomber down here, and it can go 6 spaces in total. So 1, 2, 3. So that bomber can go 3 more spaces on non-combat move. Oh look, we've got a transport down here. But let's bring in a transport too. So we look down here, and you can see down here, we could go this way here. So 1, 2 spaces, we could go up to there. So we're going to go 1, 2 spaces. Now a transport can carry 2 ground units. One of them has to be an infantry. So you could bring 2 infantry, or you could bring an infantry and a tank. You could bring an infantry and an artillery. You could bring an infantry and a mechanized infantry. You could bring, not on attack move, you couldn't bring an infantry and an anti-aircraft artillery. Anti-aircraft artillery does not move on a combat move. Now, if it had already been sitting on that transport, it could have moved. But that's the only case that an anti-aircraft artillery can move on combat movement. So that normally does not move, and we don't have one down here anyway. So we're with that one transport, we're going to bring an infantry and we're going to bring a tank up there because that's our capacity on there. Now we also have a battleship, so the battleship is going to get a shot. Remember from our naval warfare video, we have landing shots. So is that it? Is that all we want to do? I think so. There's not too much more we can do. Let me show you something up here, though. A difference with what I showed you with blitzing. Okay, you see there's a mechanized infantry here. Now, without a tank, he can't blitz, right? But he could still attack this if he wanted to, because this belonged to the British when the turn began. So that would not be a blitz. That would just be him moving 2 spaces into a combat. But that's not going to be a good attack anyway, because without splitting all these things up, that's all we have. That's all that could reach down there is this guy for now. So we're not going to do that. But all I'm saying is that you could go through there because you own this to begin with. So that is not a blitz. That is just a ground unit moving 2 spaces. And his capacity is to move 2 spaces unless he encounters a enemy territory on the first turn. Okay, so we've set all that up. Now what happens? Okay, so we're going to conduct combat. So we just get our dice on here. We might as well roll. So let's just set this up, shall we? Let's set this up on the battle board to see what it would do. So we're going to take all of these things and we're going to put them on the battle board out here, just to give you an idea of what it actually looks like. Okay, so we have a bomber, and we match the bomber up over here. We have, okay, now there's 2 tactical fighters here, right? And we have, remember the tank we used for combined arms over there? Well, we have another tank here as well. So we're going to use this tank. We're going to bring the tank over, and we've got a tactical bomber. Normally that would attack at 3, but because of combined arms, it actually goes to the 4 slot. Wait a minute, where are we? Oh, we're on the wrong side here. We got to go down here to the attacker. I was on the wrong side here. Okay, so with combined arms, the tactical bomber is going to be on the 4 slot. This is rolling at 4. This is rolling at 3. Normally the tactical bomber would be at 3, but because of the tank, we're going to 4 here. Okay, so now we have another tactical bomber here. But what do we have here? We have a fighter. Remember with from our aerial warfare video, a fighter, which goes here at 3. But if you combine a fighter with a tactical bomber, that makes the tactical bomber +1 as well. So normally the tactical bomber would be there, but with the fighter, it moves over here. So it's looking pretty good already, isn't it? We've already upscaled both of our tactical bombers with a fighter and a tank. Okay, so what else do we got here? So we have another tank that's in there, and we have a mechanized infantry, and he attacks at 1. And we have 3 artillery. Okay, so now let's cast this 5. You can't see what I'm doing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cast this chip in here, this 5 chip right here. So let's take 5. Where did I put my chips? There they are. There we go. So there's 5 chips right there. Okay. And the reason I needed to do that, and plus we have this infantry as well, right? He was the one that came over on the transport. So we have 3. All of these would normally go here, right? But we have 3 artillery, and 3 artillery can match up with 3 of either the mechanized infantry or the infantry. So let's match them with the mechanized infantry, and then we'll bring 2 infantry over as well. So there we go. We've got 2 infantry and a mechanized infantry paired with 3 artillery. And is that it? So you can see that's it over there. That's all of the British things that were in this space. Now we need to bring over the Italian stuff. So the anti-aircraft artillery goes into the 1 slot. The artillery and the infantry goes into the 2 slot. So these are gonna fight at 2 or less. So the first thing that happens, because we have a battleship here, the battleship is going to get a shore bombardment. So we'll take a look over here. Now, with a battleship, a shore bombardment is 4 or less. Okay, so he hit, that's a 4. So what we're going to do is we're going to choose a casualty. Now, if there was no planes coming in, I would choose this. You can choose the anti-aircraft artillery as a casualty. And if there was no planes coming in, then he would not get a shot at anything. But because there are 4 planes coming in, he's probably the most valuable one in this fight for the Italians. So we're going to lose the cheapest thing we have, which would be an infantry. We're just going to put it out here right beside the infantry so we know what it is. But that guy is still going to get a shot. Surprisingly, even with a shore bombardment, that guy is still gonna get his shot. So now the next thing after shore bombardment, we have got to shoot the anti-aircraft artillery. Now what they do, excuse me, an anti-aircraft artillery can take up to 3 shots against any type of plane that's coming into a combat, not into a strategic or a tactical bombing raid, but into combat. And what we're doing here, what I showed you there, that is just general combat. So we take a look over here. We've got 4 planes, right? And he can take shots at up to 3 of them. Now, if we only had 2 planes in there, then he only gets 2 shots, right? But because there are 4 planes in there, then he gets 3 shots. He doesn't get 1 against each. He just gets a maximum of 3 shots. Now, if you had 2 of those things, let's put this. Let's say that you actually had 2 of those things, then he would get 6 shots, up to 6 shots. And you see, there's 4 here, so he would actually get 4 shots. He wouldn't get 6 because you don't have 6 planes. But if you had 2 anti-aircraft artilleries, you could get up to 6 shots. But because you only have 1, you only get up to 3 shots. And yes, we have at least 3, so you're going to get 3 shots. So we come over here, and the Italian is next, and he is going to roll for that anti-aircraft artillery. And so you need to hit at a 1 or less, and he missed everything. And that's too bad, because you really, when you're rolling for your anti-aircraft artillery, that is such a good thing to have, because if you kill something, then at the very least you're killing a fighter which is worth 10 IPCs instead of killing just an infantry which is only worth 3 IPCs. So sadly, but they did not hit. So that's over with. Now we're going to start the regular attacks. So we count all these up, and we'll start at the lowest one first. So what do we got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 infantry. So if we move over here, that's 6 at 1 or less for the British. And this is a 1 here, so that's 1 hit. Okay, so let's remember that. Here, let's just put this over here. Let's put that right there on Madagascar. Just so I remember. Okay. Now we look at what do we got at 2 here? So that's 3 plus 2, 3. So that's 6 at 2. So, here, we use this one over here instead of this one. There, 6 at 2 or less, so a 1 or a 2. And look at that, we missed everything. So that was a bad shot. Okay, then we look at the next one, and at 3, we have a tank, another tank, and a fighter. So that's 3 at 3, or 3 or 3 at less. So 1 or a 2 or a 3 to hit. And they missed everything there. Okay, so that misses. Okay, so the next thing is at rolling at 4. We have 1, 2, 3 at 4. Let's change the dice there. Let's go with the other dice. And we roll those, and we got 1, 2, and a miss. The 5 is a miss, so it's 4 or less. So that's a 1 and that's a 2. That's 2 hits. So in total, we got 3 hits, right? Because we had this one here and 2 more. So let's just put that here, and we'll say that was 3 hits. There we go. Okay, now it's the Italians' turn to shoot. So what do we got here? this is already shot, remember. It doesn't shoot anymore. It only does that first round and then it's done. So what we have here is we have 4 infantry and 3 artillery, and they both fight at 2. So that's 7 at 2, because we still get to use this one. So we'll throw a British dice in there because I've only got 6 Italian dice. So let's roll all 7 of these. And that's 1 hit, only 1 hit. Okay, so then the defender has to lose first. And remember, they had 3 casualties, right? And the British are going, and the Italians hit once. So we're going to take the cheapest things, right? One of the things that I would do now is on the shore bombardment. Remember, I said you didn't want to lose that anti-aircraft artillery because you could shoot at planes. Well, I would lose that thing now, okay? And we need to lose 2 more things. There we go. That's 3 hits. So these things are off the board now. Now it's up to the British to lose 1 thing, and we're going to take the cheapest thing. So we'll lose 1 of these infantry over here. Okay, so now we can go. It's up to the British now. The British can decide, should I stop or should I keep going? And of course you're going to keep going in this instance, because you look at that. I mean, there's no doubt that you're going to keep going. You've got overwhelming odds there when you look at all the stuff here against what little the Italians have. So that's 5 at 1, and that's a 1. Sorry, I had the camera in the wrong spot. So we've got a 1. And then again we have 6 at 2. Here, let's use this one again over here. That we got 6 at 2. Remember, we had the 3 artillery, the mechanized infantry, and the 2 infantry. So that's 6 at 2 or less. So a 1 or a 2. There's 1, 2, 3. So that's 4 hits so far. Now let's take a look over here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 things left for the Italians, and we have 4 hits for the British. Now we could keep rolling, but there's no need to. It doesn't matter how many bullets you put in those units over there. You can only kill them once. So we can just say, okay, the attack is over, but these 4 things that have been hit, but they still get to shoot back. Okay, so then we take the 4 Italians, and they all roll at 2 again, and they all missed. See that? It was all misses. So that was a very successful attack for the British. And so what we do, let's put everything back over here. We'll just put everything back on here. This will only take a minute. And so, like, this is also a good thing to teach you too. It's really good to go with overwhelming odds. I mean, if you don't have the overwhelming odds to go with, then that's okay too. But this, you know, like if you only had slight odds, this could have went 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 rounds, right? And the more shots that the Italians get, the better chance they have to take units off you. So we've taken this, so we can take this off of here, and we'll put a British pie on there. I call them pies. They're also called roundels. So the British have taken that over now. So they did pretty good. See, they took this territory up here, and they liberated this territory. When you take your own territory back, it's called liberating it. They liberated this territory here, and but we're not done yet. So that's the combat, and we would do our combat all over the board. You know, if there was other attacks, maybe these guys were attacking these guys or something. You know, maybe those guys up there were going to do something. Maybe these guys over here were going to do some kind of attack. We would do all of those attack. We would roll all of those things now. And you know, with the amount of guys that I had here, that's why I moved it to the battle board. If you've just got, you know, like 3 dudes and an artillery and a fighter against a dude, there's no sense in moving all that to the battle board. I mean, you can see, you know, how you can count it up pretty easily. You know, how many you got at 1 and how many you got at 3. You know what I mean? And the guy's got 1 and 2. Like, you don't have to move all that over to the battle board. I hardly ever use the battle board. It's only with really big attacks that I do that. So non-combat move. So now we would move only things that we haven't moved. As far as our ground units over here go, we've moved them all except for these two dudes right here. These two dudes can move if they want. So, and they can only move one space. So if we wanted, we could move them up to here. We could move this boat if we wanted to. He could go, he's at a naval base, he could go 3 spaces if he wants. You know, I might move him over here to help protect those if there was anybody in the area that could reach them. Or if not, you know, I might even just leave him here, right? But we do have to fly these fighters away, or the planes away, because they can't stay here. We just conquered this territory, and they can't stay there. Now remember the smaller planes; they all went 2, and they can go 2 more. And so you know what? I think I would put them back up here on Egypt, because they would be more useful up there than they would be in South Africa. There's nobody left to attack down here. These are just strict neutrals, and I definitely don't want to be attacking these strict neutrals down here. So there's nobody to attack down there. So it makes more sense for me to fly my planes up there. Now the bomber went 3, he could go 3 more. He doesn't have to go 3, he could go 2 if he wants. So I'm just going to move him up to Egypt as well. And then, you know, I could move these guys around if I wanted to, because they haven't moved yet. I could move those boats there. I could move anything that hasn't moved yet. I could move it. But for the most part, I'm just showing you what's going on down there. All of this stuff has moved, and it can't move anymore. The reason that the British were able to take this territory, see, this is a French territory, and normally they would be, they are allies, but by this point in the game, if the French have lost their capital. Before the British even got to go, the Germans would have taken out the German capital, and so with the Italians have taken this space and this space, then when the British take it back, then they would actually conquer it, because French doesn't have a capital. But if the French still had their capital, or if they ever to get their capital back, then you have to take these off and say that you've liberated French territories. But because France doesn't have a capital, you can actually conquer these territories. So that's a bit of a difference there. I hope that's a good explanation. So what else do we got here? Is there any good combined arms that I haven't told you about? Let me just take a look here. These are Sire Blood's cards here. There's the combined arms. You see at the top there, the infantry plus the artillery means the infantry attacked at 2, just like I showed you. And mechanized infantry and artillery means the mechanized infantry attacked at 2. And then there was the tactical bomber and the tank. The tactical bomber attacked at 4. And the tactical bomber and the fighter means the tactical bomber attacked at 4. And the mechanized infantry and the tank means the mechanized infantry could blitz. So those are all the things that we use. We used almost all of the combined arms in that attack. So you can imagine it took me a while to dream up this attack, because it all had to be just perfect, right? Where I could do an amphibious assault and everything at the same time. So we've used just about everything we could possibly use there. And there's not much more to show you there. I guess I could show you one more thing, and it has to do with tactics. Let me just grab some Americans here. This will only take a second. Sitting right beside the case here. So let's just take all of those and put all these over here, and let's say that none of that happened, and you know. Okay. And let's put some battalions back on. Let's just put these guys back on. And let's say that the Americans are sitting right here. They've got these things, and the British have these things. Now this is called a can opener. So the Americans' turn is just before the British. What you could do is you could bring the Americans in here and take these 2 things out. Let's say you lost a dude doing that, and then the Americans, they put their pie on there. Let's put these things over here, okay? So you could do that, and then then the American turn ends. When it ends, like you finish the American turn off, and then Then with the British turn, see, like you couldn't have done this if the Americans hadn't done this. You couldn't have gone over and attacked these guys because of the Italians that were in the way, right? But because the Americans came down here and took that out for you, now it's the British turn. This is not the you can do that. You could blitz, or that's not even blitzing. You could bring all four of those through there because the first territory you encountered was a friendly territory. And it was there was no enemy units in there. Remember, we couldn't go through here because of the air base. Well, none of that exists here. The Americans actually own this territory, so you could go through there. Even if there was nothing there, you could have blitzed through there because you have 2 tanks and 2 mechanized infantry. But because there was stuff there, you wanted to take them out. And this is a pretty small one to show you. Like normally, if you're doing a can opener, you're taking something bigger. But always you got to remember when you're doing that, for the second guy that's going to go through, you have to have things that are going 2 spaces, because it doesn't do any good if all you had was this, you took this out, and then all you could do anyway is move 1 space. So you haven't gone 2 spaces, you've only gone 1. But I would do this attack here anyway, and let's say you take these out, and let's say you lose these 2 things here, and then British puts their pie on. Well, actually they wouldn't put their pie on because this is an originally controlled British territory. So you've liberated that territory. I would still move these guys up here on the non-combat move, like that. So that's an example of a can opener. The Americans opened the can, and the British ate the food inside. They stuck their fork in there, but somebody had to open the can for them, right? So that's the example of a can opener, and I think that's just about it. Like it seems like. Like my videos are usually longer than this, and it seems like I should keep going, but I think I've pretty much explained everything to you. There's more to do with amphibious assaults, but I'm not going to go into it on this video. If you want to see more on amphibious assaults, then you should go see the video on naval warfare. If you want to see more on moves with the planes, strategic bombing raids, then go watch the aerial warfare video. This one here was mostly just for ground units, but I wanted to show you that the ground units, that's what transports are for, is for transporting ground units, and ground units are important in this game. And so I finished showing you everything I need to show you. Let me just talk to you for a minute about this. And I know I've said this on my videos before, and it's worth saying again, that the war is fought, it's won and lost up there on the continent of Eurasia. And the Americans, the only reason they buy boats is either to protect their transports, or to pave the way for their transports, or to protect their homeland over there. That's the only reason the Americans buy warships. They need to put ground units onto transports. They need to get them over there into Europe, or onto Asia, or onto Japan. Japan is difficult. The Japanese player, you kind of got to catch them sleeping for you to be able to put ground units into Japan. I mean, it's not unheard of, but the guys really got to make some kind of mistake for that to happen for you. But the ground units are the most important thing in this game. Really, they're the only thing that matters. The other things, they're just periphery stuff. The aerial units, because they fight on the ground, they're important too. But aerial units, as you've seen in the last video, they don't take over territories. Like if you just came into that attack that I showed you there with just the planes, and you took out the Italians, you wouldn't have taken that space. It still would have been an Italian space like this. You wouldn't have taken it out, because a plane can't land there. It can't take over that territory. You have to have ground units to take over territories. And there is one more thing that I can show you, and that's capturing a capital, because that's what we're talking about, is ground units. You can't capture capitals with planes. You can't capture capitals with boats. You can't capture victory cities with those things. You can only capture them with ground units. So let's say that the Japanese do come in. We're taking a look at India here. Let's say that the Japanese do come in and they take out everybody here, and all they have left are these guys here. What'll happen then is that they will get the money, all of the money that UK Pacific had. And it didn't matter what capital. Like if it was the British taking over Berlin, then they would take Germany's money. Whatever money they have, on hand at the time, if they were saving money or if they just have the money that they got from their last turn when they collected their income. Whatever they have on them at the time, they have to surrender that money to the nation that takes them back. And also what happens, like if you take over a major industrial complex like that, then it all of a sudden reverts to a minor industrial complex. So you take the major off, you put the minor one on. And then Japan, if they still own that minor industrial complex at the end of, or at the beginning of their next turn, they can actually use that. A minor industrial complex you can put 3 units on. They can put 3 units on there if they still own that territory on the next turn. They couldn't put stuff on there on this turn, the turn that they took out India, because you have to own an industrial complex at the start of your turn in order to be able to place things on it. So they wouldn't be able to just take it over and put 3 things on, but they could if they still owned it at the end of, or at the beginning of their next turn. Then they could put things on it there. Now, if somebody came along and took that back from them, let's say it wasn't the British, let's say it was just, let's say the Americans came back and took these guys out, the Americans don't get that. What they've done is they've liberated that capital. So it goes back to the British player. But the factory now, it does not go back to being a major factory. Once you've knocked that down to a minor factory, then it stays that way unless the British player wants to pay money. And it costs you 20 IPCs to make that minor factory into a major factory. And that's a lot of money. So, probably not, it's not often that you see a capital get liberated and then the nation upscale that factory again to a major industrial complex because of the cost. It's a huge cost for a major industrial complex. So likely what would happen for the rest of the game is the British would be using a minor industrial complex on India, if that was the case. Now that's India, and that's a bit of a special case because the British would still be placing units on over there. But if it was, say, Moscow that you took out, if the Germans had taken out Moscow, well, they would take the Russian money, and then the Russians, they don't get to put anything on. They don't have any money. When you lose your complex, you do not collect money, so you can't put money on. You can't buy anything. Even if you have other complexes like the one down there in Ukraine and the other one in Stalingrad there, even though you still have complexes, I'm missing the one on Stalingrad. Okay, I'll put one on, don't worry. But even if you still have complexes, you don't have any money to buy things, to put things on. And you can't collect money until you get your capital back. So keeping your capital, that is the most important thing in this game, is not allowing your capital to fall into enemy hands. Because it just is devastating when that happens. You lose all your money. Not only do you lose all your money, but your opponent gains all that money. They all of a sudden they've got a big bonus. Not only have they taken a lot of territory in order to do that, and capitals are usually worth a few bucks, right? Just the space itself, the territory. Well, now they've also got a big whack of money, and so it's a big shift in the game, right? Like that, they're gonna all of a sudden on the next turn put tons of stuff on, right? And it's tough to come back from that. You went one turn without putting stuff on, and they went one turn putting double the stuff on, basically, right? So it's you have to hang on to your capital at all costs. That is your number one concern, and that's why ground units are so important in this game. Because you need a ground unit in order to capture a territory. You can't capture a territory with a plane. You can't capture it with excuse me, I got something in my throat there. You can't capture a territory with a plane. You can't capture it with a boat, and you can't capture it with an anti-aircraft gun either. Even though that's a ground unit, you can't do it on an attack move. So if that's not your territory already, you can't take it out, can you? Because that would be an attack move moving in there. You can move these things one space, but you can only move them from one place that you own to another place that you own like that. It's called a non-combat move, right? They only move on non-combat movement. They don't move on combat movement. So the only thing that you can take out a territory with is a tank, an infantry, an artillery, or a mechanized infantry. These are the only things that can capture a territory. These are the only things that can capture a capital. These are the only things that can capture a victory city. They're the only things that really matter in this game. Even though they're the cheapest things on the board, they're the only things that really matter. The other things just help these things to do that. The boats and the planes, they just help these guys capture territories. That's all they do. And always keep that in mind. Okay, I'm out of breath now. So usually I make videos a little bit at a time and splice them together, but this one was fairly simple and everything happened in one area, so I was able to just take a breath and spew it all out at once. Anyway, thanks for joining me today. That is my Ground Warfare 101 video. Take care, everybody. General Haggard out.